What's up, everybody? It's your boy Kendall, and it is day 50! Day 50. We are halfway there. Whoa! Living on a prayer. Maybe it was me, but Bon Jovi, right? We're halfway there. We're halfway there. Oh, coding on a prayer. Because what it feels like sometimes I feel like you're coding on a prayer. You're coding and you're hoping to the dear Lord that something happens on your page and something shows up. Unfortunately, that is what we're talking about today. It's on a theme. So we know that we're doing 100 days of code and we're halfway in day 50 of 100 days of code. And we all remember them by now. That number one, well, I actually can't remember. We code 1 hour a day. 2, that we keep ourselves accountable publicly. And 3, that we share our thoughts and our feelings and those sorts of things. So what did we get up to today? Well, we started a little bit later. We started at 11 a.m. today. So for those of you who don't know, my 100 days of code goes alongside going to School of Code, the most amazing boot camp of diverse, awesome, radical people that go from zero to hero in 16 weeks. We go from knowing nothing to becoming full stack developers. And we are also halfway through that journey. So I'm halfway through 100 days of code, 50 days into 100 days of code. And on week 8 began today, week 8 of 16. I cannot believe it. Halfway through. And we are having an absolute blast. It's challenging, but it's a blast. And it's also week 2 of learning about React. So today we started learning about sort of keeping components pure. So this morning we did our normal squats. We did all that sort of thing to I think Elder Scrolls theme tunes, Morrowind, and all that good stuff. So that was a lot of fun. And then after that, then we sort of started going through keeping components pure. We went through some React beta docs, which are about I think they're part of the way done. And so we got to read about that. And so we learned about JavaScript functions are pure. And that pure functions, they only perform a calculation and nothing more. So the whole thing behind pure and impure, a pure component is something that only really does one thing. It does one thing. It helps save your code. It helps keep things clean, these sorts of things. And purity, so components is formulas. And they give the example of something like, for example, if you input something like A plus B and it equals something, you then return what it does. Every single time when you pass something into that actual function, that means that it will actually do what it needs to do. And it doesn't do anything extra than that, which is really cool. And also, that applies to React. React is actually designed around pure components and pure coding. And what that means is that React assumes that every component that you write is a pure function. It's easy to test, it's easy to read, and it's easy to function. And this means that React components that you write must always return the same JSX, given the same inputs. So no matter what you put in it, it always comes out with the same result. It renders the same thing, which is pretty cool. So for example, if you had a function and you input cups, then you could input cups and it would always return the same render on the result. It might say boil 1 cup of milk, and it would always, whatever number you put in, it would be 2 and then it'd be 3, but the render would always be the same. It would never change, which is really, really cool. We also talked about side effects. And side effects are what they call sort of unintended or intended consequences that React's rendering process must always be pure. So the way that it renders, the way that it shows things on the page, the way that it shows up. And the components should only return their JSX and not change any object. So if you had something outside of it that was declared or something, you would not change that inside the function, because that would dirty it up and that would make it impure. So you wouldn't want to do that. What else did we look at? We looked at local mutation, your component's little secrets. That the problem was that components, there's mutation and immutable. So you don't want it to be mutable, you want it to be immutable. So the thing is that mutable thing, it changes the original. You don't want to change the original. You want it to always return the right result and to do something different. So it's really cool. Let's see, we talked about sort of about side effects, where you can cause side effects. Functional program relies heavily on purity, and that at some point, somewhere, something has to change. And that's the point of programming. That these changes, updating the screen, starting animation, changing the data, that they're called side effects. These are what side effects are. And they're things that happen on the side, not during the rendering. So they happen not during the rendering, not inside, but they happen on a different scale, right? So in React, its side effects usually belong inside event handlers. And and even though event handlers are defined inside your components, that they don't run during your rendering. So it's very important. That's something we learned. So event handlers don't need to be pure, right? So we talked about sort of with JSX, there's something called useEffect that you can call in your components. And this tells React to execute whatever it is later, after rendering, when side effects are allowed. However, this approach, it's the last resort. So really this useEffect hook that we learned about today and we went into, it's really the last thing you want to do. You want to do event listeners before you ever go to anything like a use events. And that when possible, try to express your logic with rendering alone. And really that will take you as far as really you need to. So recapping today, we went through things that a component must be pure. It's got to mind its own business. It should not change any objects or variables that existed before rendering. And the same inputs and the same output. You'll always get the same thing. We also had a workshop where we learned how to use useEffects. And we used useEffect in actually rendering an API, so fetching data from an API. And we had two sort of components, a Pokemon viewer, and then we have the app bit as well. And we essentially had to fetch the data from the Pokemon API data. And then we had to render out the ID randomly. And we could also render a picture, and we could render the name as well, which is what we did. We got the whole thing done, which is awesome. So we got all those dopamines, and it was an awesome day. So my thoughts and feelings about today is I got a new partner, Joe. He's awesome. So had a lot of fun there. Really enjoyed the task today. We saw Dr. Chris Mia. He came back and joined us today. Welcome back, Chris. It was great to have you back with us. And it was cool to learn more about React. So I'm just super excited about learning more about React and seeing where else it takes us. We got all the dopamines. We saw lots of Pokemon come up on the screen. We got to press our button and things happened. So, yeah. Kudos to Joe. Kudos to Dr. Chris Mia. And kudos to all you School of Coders. That's day 50. Kendall, signing out. Peace out. And we'll see you guys later. Have a great day. Whatever you get up to.